It's a great pleasure having you here with us today and a very important topic on educational technology, one of the top thematic priority areas in the SAMENA region. And again, SAMENA stands for South Asia, Middle East, and North Africa. Today, we have four wonderful presentations from four experts. We would start with the welcome and introduction like we're doing now, and then we would have a presentation to tell us about the state of educational technology adoption, an overview of the current use of educational technology in education for better access and equity, and how digital transformation is unfolding in different contexts across the world, with focus on South Asia and the MENA subregions. And here we would have Evans Atas, who's an education economist for the Global Partnership of Education. And Evans, let me introduce Evans. Evans Atas is currently an educational economist at the Global Partnership for Education, GPE, with over 12 years of experience in international education. In his current role, he mobilizes evidence and provides technical advice to the Global Partnership of Education Secretariat and partner countries on technology for education, data systems, and uptake of evidence into policy education. Policy design and implementation. Previously, he worked with UNICEF and facilitated education data, system strengthening, education system diagnostics, and planning processes, including the development of education digital transformation strategies at the country level. And thanks, Evans, for being here with us today. Then, after Evans' presentation, we would have a question and answers slot where you would freely ask questions. You write your questions on the chat, and this would be moderated by my colleague, Alison Vaz, who is going to be moderating the questions and answers after Evans' presentation. Then we would proceed with more presentations. The first one is going to be about addressing the digital divide, the case of Bangladesh, overcoming the challenges in infrastructure, connectivity, and access to technology that create barriers to equitable education. And this is really a very relevant and important topic. And it is going to be given by Aknaksha Bapna, who is the Senior Research Fellow of ODI Global. And I would be very happy here to introduce Aknaksha. Aknaksha Bapna is a Senior Research Fellow who has been working extensively on education, bridging the gap between practice, policy, and research for well over a decade. She has extensive experience in experimental design, both in science as well as the social sciences, and has integrated qualitative, quantitative, and mixed method approach in her work, researching and measuring the impact of education interventions internationally. She has been advising on strategy for high-quality data practices and leading large-scale research studies for state governments as well as international organizations such as the World Bank, the Lego Foundation, Sesame, and Education Tech Hub. Aknaksha is now building the research agenda at the intersection of education and climate change by bridging her expertise in causal inferences and systems methodologies to build the evidence on what works, what is needed for climate change education. She holds a PhD in biochemistry from the University of Cambridge and a master's degree in international education policy from Harvard University. And we're very happy to have you here with us, dear Aknaksha. Then this presentation is going to be followed by a topic of teacher training and capacity building, which is a common challenge in the SAMENA sub-region, and the role of academia. And here we would know more about strategies for effectively training educators to integrate technology in the classroom and enhance student engagement. And we would have here Professor Mohammed Al-Naggar, who is the Professor of Education Technology at the National E-Learning University, Egyptian E-Learning University in Egypt. And I would like here to introduce Professor Al-Naggar. Professor El-Naggar is a Professor of Education Technology, Educational Studies Programs Director at the Continuing Learning Center Manager at the National Egyptian E-Learning University. coordinated and developed a lot of international projects like Erasmus Plus, which is an EU fund in the field of STEM education and special education, supervised and arbitrated more than 100 master theses and PhD dissertations in education technology and e-learning. He participated and organized many national and international conferences. It is really great to have you here with us today, Professor El Naggar. And we would go to the West and then go to Tunisia to talk about the policy frameworks and government support, and especially about the case of Tunisia, the role of government in fostering an enabling environment for EdTech innovation and integration into national curricula. And here we would have Mr. Adel Galgoul, Senior Digital Transformation, a consultant for the World Bank, and I would love as well to introduce him. Mr. Galgoul is a senior digital transformation consultant at the World Bank. He previously served as the Secretary of State for Technologies in Tunisia in 2011. He has led several public and private sector companies, including as CEO of the Tunisian Internet Agency, Tunisian Post, and Director General of the Center for Educational Technologies. He has led large-scale digitalization programs in the education, banking, and ICT sectors. Since 2016, he has been an international government tech consultant for the World Bank in the area of human resources and governance, working on projects in North Africa and Mashriq region. Adel Galgoul is an engineer with the degrees from the National Institute of Telecommunication in France and the National Defense Institute in Tunisia. He is a senior GovTech EdTech specialist, and it's really a pleasure having you here with us today, Mr. Adel. This would be followed as well by another section of questions and answers, and we would be very happy to receive all your questions and comments on the chat during the presentation, so as to be able to respond to them into the Q&A slot. And then we would have the closing remark by José Luis Canalas, who is the KIX EMAP Hub director, before we close. And now it's my pleasure to invite Evans Ates for his first presentation, and hope you enjoy it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I was just uploading my presentation. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and to share some of the reflections and that we have at GPE. And also based on the evidence that we are seeing. We recently launched a report of where we describe how GPE is supporting countries, or GPE is planning to support countries to make technology work for education. So in my presentation today, I will share with you, first of all, because we are talking about technology for education, we need to understand what problem we are trying to solve, what education problem we're trying to solve. So it's good to understand the situation mostly in the region where we are working in, South Asia and MENA. And also we will look at the digital landscape, and also we will look at the evidence and bringing in wherever is possible some examples from countries. And we will also look at the current practices and where progress is needed. And if we have enough time, we could discuss what could be the way forward and how GPE is concretely supporting countries. For the first question quickly, let me say that what we are seeing in South Asia and MENA is that we have a problem of access mostly at secondary level. We know that we have a huge number of children and young people who are out of schools. We're looking at 31 million in South Asia, of which 23 at secondary level, and in MENA, it is estimated at 15 million. So that's the latest number we have at our level. We wouldn't be surprised if these numbers have changed, but this is the numbers that we're working with. The other aspect is about the learning levels. We've seen these estimations that were done by the World Bank, where we see that almost 8 out of 10 children cannot read and comprehend a sample story. So basically, you've seen these numbers already, I'm very sure. And we're looking at MENA, Middle East, and North African countries. We see that 7 out of 10 children, they cannot read and comprehend a sample text. And in both cases, we've observed a decrease when we compare before the pandemic and after the pandemic. But the reality is that learning levels were already a bit low. So basically, these are the challenges. These are the main challenges we have at hand. So I try to simplify, but we know we have more complex challenges than that. But when we look at the access and learning, this is where we see that how can technology help to solve those problems in these regions. Now, looking at the question on the digital landscape, we use this data from ITU on connectivity status, where we look at the universal connectivity pillar. That looks at mainly the access for individual access to internet for individuals and home access also, and they got and also the mobile broadband, and we're seeing that in South Asia, it's really below 80% when we look at the meaningful connectivity pillar. And when we look at how many people are really having access to internet, it's really below 60%. Or for some countries, it's even way less when we look at Afghanistan or Bangladesh or even Pakistan. And when we look into countries in MENA, we see that the numbers are even are lower than that, because for universal connectivity, it's really below 80%, and meaningful connectivity is right above. But the reality is, across the country, there is great variability, because for a country like Yemen, or for a country like I would say even Djibouti, for example, you see that the level of connectivity it's quite low. When we look at now, previously we were looking at infrastructure to access really information online, but when we look at now the level of readiness for artificial intelligence, the first thing we notice is that we know that the AI tools, they are built on data. And we know to have meaningful learning, we need contextualized data. And we're seeing that most of the information that's being used to build the AI tools, they are coming really from the US, from Europe, and of course a little bit from Asia. But we're seeing that South Asia and also the North Africa, there is very little data, or I would say almost no data coming in to build those AI tools. And we know for meaningful learning, again, we need contextualized information. And when we look at the level of readiness, where they consider whether it's the government pillar, whether it's technology pillar, whether it's about infrastructure. And we see that a very low level of readiness, where it's for South Asia, it stands at 39. And then for MENA, it's 48. But for MENA, the problem again is that we have some great front runners that, shadow a little bit those who are lagging behind. Now, because we want technology to work for education, so what is the capacity, and also whether do we have equal access? So most of the times we see that gender norm and also safety concerns can limit access to technology. And however, when technology is designed with equity and inclusion as a key principle, it has a chance to empower everyone. And we've seen in the numbers that male youth are more likely to possess digital skills than female youth. For example, if we look at in Pakistan, where we have the gender parity index that's very low, like in Balochistan or Sindh, while Tunisia is a good example where we have some great level of gender parity, although sometimes gender parity doesn't mean that everyone is having access, but it's more like whether it favors more boys and young men or more girls and young women. And we've seen that some studies like from Bangladesh, Pakistan, and India, where we have great potentials where technology is used, it provides a greater empowerment for both, for all genders when technology is used and is used in education. The other aspect I wanted to focus here is the fact that we are talking about capacity and how technology can provide skills and also can prepare the next generation for the digital economy that's coming up. And we know that 44% of workers' competencies are likely to be disrupted in the coming years. And also we know 70% of new economic value will be created by business models empowered by digital technology. However, to acquire the digital skills to be able to thrive, you need to have the foundational skills. And what we are seeing, for example, in some countries, mainly like Pakistan and Nepal, we're saying, for example, for Pakistan, where like girls, they are at a disadvantage in foundational reading skills and also in digital skills. And for Nepal, while girls, they are at an advantage in foundational skills, but they are still having issues with digital skills. So we're trying to see really how we need to link the foundational skills to be able to acquire basic and advanced digital skills later and to be able to thrive. So this is more or less the situation we are seeing when we analyze the relationship between technology skills and employability. The third question is about what do we know so far in terms of impact of technology on education? Research on what works is growing, it's true, but as we know, the political economy of using evidence is a complicated one, and so this evidence base is not always fully utilized, and sometimes not necessarily well utilized. And there is a recent study that came out earlier this year where we found out that policymakers really adopt digital solutions sometimes based on the credibility of who is putting the solution forward and also how it impacts visibility. And the other aspect, we know now also that when you provide only devices to school without a clear strategies, of course, there is no impact. And the other point is that the good news is that when we design digital learning solutions that really enhance teaching practices and allow for high personalization, we see great results. And sometimes it goes from the effect size can go from 0.18 to 0.35, which is for some expert, it's more like 2 to 3 months of additional progress going to 4 to 6 months of educational progress. And in India, we remember that study that was done in 2007, where on the second year of the intervention, there was an effect size of 0.47. Again, we know that these interventions, they cost money, and we still have no great evidence about the total cost of these interventions to ensure that they are cost effective and to ensure that technology is implemented at scale. The other point is that the good news, because we are working in countries where there are a lot of disparities, low-tech solutions has been proven to be working. For example, we know that there was this experiment in India and Nepal where they provide tutoring via text message and phone calls, and it does show improvement in learning outcomes. And for example, in India, we had 0.21 in terms of effect size, which is more like getting close to 3 months of educational progress. And Nepal, it was a little bit less than 2 months, but still we're seeing great impact. Countries also are using advanced technologies to improve efficiency in terms of how they allocate resources, how they predict needs, how they track results. We've seen that in the case of Maldives. And the idea now is to really make sure we have the right and enabling environment to use those technologies and making sure that they are implemented at all levels. And it's true that we've seen early evidence that AI tools could improve teacher effectiveness in underserved communities, but we still need to make sure that the data that's being used is from the context where the solutions are being applied. Otherwise, it will it will generate more disparities. Now, the fourth question, it's what are the current practices and where more progress is needed? We have looked at different entry points in terms of leadership and coordination. We see that countries in South Asia and MENA, that in terms of master plan strategies and how the value they give to technology is quite high, which is a very good thing. And the other point is more like how we are ensuring equity and inclusion is at the center of those strategies, but also when it comes to the implementation, how we reduce fragmentation and also how we go at scale. And this is where I was saying that we need additional research around how on implementation approaches that are very effective to improve educational outcomes. In terms of capacity, I think some of my colleagues will talk later about how they're building capacity, but we've seen a lot of efforts, for example, in Egypt, that are being done to build teachers' capacities, to build education authorities' capacity. But at global level, we are seeing that 40% of low-income countries and 55% of lower middle-income countries, they don't have any standards really in terms of a competency or teacher training framework. And when I say they don't have standards, it means that they don't necessarily have a standards which is contextualized and that can be applied. And the other aspect is how teachers feel. And it's more like we're seeing that at least 2/3 of teachers, sometimes they feel that they don't have the skills to really support, to teach when they are in the classroom. And the third one is about content quality. Especially in the regions where we are working, we have a lot of learning platforms, great learning platforms, whether it's in Pakistan with Learning Passport or India or Nepal. But the problem is that we still have an issue of aligning those learning platforms with sound pedagogical methods, making sure that we include different format, different strategies to teach, gamification. So we still have a long way to go in terms of make sure that those platforms really meet the standards that can improve learning outcomes and for all learners. The fourth aspect we look at is the connectivity. There's a colleague from Tunisia here. I also heard of this EduNet initiative where Ministry of Education works with Ministry of ICT to see how they can connect education institutions. And we've heard of the UNICEF initiative, the GIGA initiative, trying to really bring everyone together to connect schools. But some countries in the region are really lagging behind. Globally, what we're seeing is that only 40% of primary schools are connected to internet and 50% of lower secondary schools, and it doesn't go above 70% for upper primary schools. And in terms of having devices that are used for teaching purposes, only 47% in primary schools and 62% in low secondary schools. And the other issue in entry point we look at is the cost and financing. It is estimated that if countries need to achieve the SDG 4, this would, if they have to spend all the money, if they have to really cover the digital transformation of the entire education system, it would add another 50% gap on their budget, basically. So we are talking about $21 billion on capital expenditure and $12 billion a year on maintenance for all low and middle income countries. I mean, we've seen some good examples of innovative financing. I know GPE and the Asian Development Bank are working with Bangladesh to have what we call an innovative financing tool to see how we can support the use of technology to address education issues. And we have other countries where these innovative financing instruments were used, where private partners, public and multilateral development banks come together to really support countries. The last point is around the data and evidence. There are a lot of efforts to really use technology to improve the generation and the use of data, and also to use that data for research and also to really inform programming. But again, we're still lacking a lot of information around cost effectiveness and also how to implement at scale. So these are really areas that we think that require additional research, and to really make sure that this evidence is ready for policymakers to make decisions. And the last question, if I still have time, is how can we move forward, and how is GPE supporting? You might have heard that recently we adopted during the UN General Assembly a global framework with 6 pillars, and that are aligned with the points I mentioned above with the entry points. And the idea really to make sure that to use them as a way to self-assess the digital readiness of the countries and how to strategize and see where we need to reinforce, whether it's around the leadership of collaboration, capacity, how we need to have a clear idea of the costs, building financing models, whether it's about the content or the digital solutions that we have, whether it's about the connectivity, but really having data and evidence at the center. But the most important thing when we are implementing is to really having some key principles. where let's make sure that education is at the center, education challenges, education goals, equity and inclusion, making sure we have context. And we need to design really for sustainability and scalability. And the other thing is making sure that we don't do any harm to the users, the learners, the teachers that are using those tools. For GPE itself, we have different entry points. We really encourage countries to really, when you're assessing your education system bottlenecks, it's a great opportunity to really assess the digital readiness, looking at all the 6 pillars that we just mentioned. But also, it's also an opportunity to really bring partners together to leverage the resources, but more importantly, the expertise that those partners bring. And when doing the programming process, the principles that I mentioned earlier, whether it's equity and inclusion, having teachers and learners at the center, these things sometimes we focus only on the solutions without thinking that for whom we are developing the solutions, but we need to make sure that those principles remain at the center of the programming process. And of course, give ourselves enough time. Let's be agile in our programming, in our implementation, just to create a platform to learn and also to adapt if there is a need to adapt our strategy. At global level, GPE will really continue to support learning exchange and also get partners to collaborate behind initiatives that can go at scale. And also we're trying to see how we can build more localized partnerships and how we can support financing models to scale up promising initiatives. And also, of course, as a partnership, we're really trying to support the knowledge sharing. And I think KIX EMAP, this is what's being done now. And I really commend these initiatives. It's really always a good opportunity to really share what's working and more importantly, what's not working, so we don't waste resources or make the same mistakes that we did in the past. I will stop here, and I hope I didn't go over time, but I'm ready for questions if there are any.
Thank you so much, Evans, for keeping track of time and for the wonderful information and the relevant information, like giving examples from Bangladesh and Tunisia and Egypt and countries in the sub-region is really very relevant to the SAMENA sub-region. And now I would give the floor to my colleague Alison Vaz, because we have been receiving wonderful questions in the chat. So please, Alison, take over.
Thank you, Rasha. Thank you, Evans, for such a thorough presentation. Our first question comes from Shakzod Mardanov. I apologize if I mess up any names. They're wondering, how can EdTech in the Middle East address the skills gap and prepare students for the demands of the global economy?
Should I respond one by one? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, let's start with one. We're welcoming questions in the chat, and we'll go from there.
Okay, great. I mean, the good news is that we do have competency frameworks that exist at global level. And I am against the fact that we would take the competency framework and then we just apply it directly. And for me, contextualization is important, because we know that the markets that are driving the economy, we're not necessarily training people just for the economy, but also it's a matter of, social cohesion, peace. But when we look at the global economy, we know what's driving the economy, and making sure that we contextualize those competency framework, whether it's about general ICT skills, whether it's about AI competency framework. We've seen some global tools that exist. UNESCO issued a couple of tools, and other partners are working on some tools. And the idea is really to make sure that really we contextualize those tools. And in terms of rollout, we don't do it without the teachers or the people who will help with that process. And that's the most important point, because we've done that before, where we develop tools and then we introduce those tools to those teachers. They say, well, I don't see myself teaching this. I don't see enough autonomy in doing this. So involving those who will be really passing on this information to other generations, it's very important. And the other aspect, people learn in schools and outside of schools. And so we need to understand that technology gives us that opportunity to have different pathways. And if we can really diversify those pathways in our countries, to making sure that learning is available everywhere at any time, it's the most important thing that will really help solve some of these problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Elisa Valentine. Her question is about the lack of data representation for AI training that you had mentioned. And she's wondering what kind of representative data or data sets do exist, and are there any initiatives that exist regarding increasing representation in order to encourage more contextual technology tools?
As we can see on the map, so the data represents the countries where they come from. We're talking about languages, we're talking about culture, we're talking about perceptions also of the world of other countries, because you have that also, because the data that you have in those places, they don't necessarily talk about those places themselves, but also it projects their perceptions of the rest of the world. So this is the kind of data that we have. I know a lot of partners who are building those data sets. They do a lot of work in curating the data, but again, it cannot replace the reality of the countries where we are living in, and that's really the problem. We know that there are a couple of initiatives. For example, we know that AI4Education.org, which is an institution who's trying to help with that. I know Google is really interested in really working with partners to see how we can address the issues. There are a lot of efforts that are being done, but of course, we need to admit that it's costly. So what's happening is how the countries themselves are building their own data sets. Because oftentimes we go for even myself, if I have my own organizations, I want to build the data sets. If something already exists and I have access to it, I will use it. And this is where each country really, if we want to be represented, then we need to build our own tools to make sure and claim our representation in the data sets that are being built.
Wonderful. Thank you. We've received another question from Kaiser Munir, who shares the quote, "Technology is not replacing humans," and then asks how to dispel this impression in order to encourage education managers to better use technology for education.
I think there is an important point around how we embrace change, and also how we design, our education system, because we design the education system for the learners, for societies, but also for teachers. So in this idea, when we have those principles in mind, we make sure that we don't, spread false information in terms of saying technology will replace human, and we know it's not the case. And even in the situation where we said, okay, let's focus on the human-centered skills, whether the soft skills, the 21st century skills we're talking about, whether it's around critical thinking, analytical thinking, collaboration. So we need to focus on these things, but we need to be very clear with ourselves. It will not replace human. We definitely need to track how it's moving jobs around. We will definitely need to track our relationship with technologies, how it's affecting our brain, our daily life. That's something that we need to do. But again, leaders making plans for education needs to really embrace that change in a way and have clear communication on how they intend to use technology for education, but also for the entire society.
Thank you. We have received another question from Mahmoud Salama, who gives a little context to their question, but says that here in Egypt, they have a good experience with the national assessments for grades 4 and 7. The assessments reassured the results that you mentioned about the numbers of pupils who cannot understand a simple text. They started to make use of technology broadly in high school, but in the lower grades, they need some more effort, which requires resources. So the question is, how can they lessen the financial gap in order to achieve these goals? Global partners are playing a good role in enabling education systems technology, but the efforts are not sufficient as there's still a large gap regarding the number of available teachers and qualified teachers.
Yeah, it's a real problem. Some people think that we in the education community, we are not ambitious enough when asking for resources to achieve the goals, because when we think of it, we are really at the center of this transition that's happening, whether it's about the digital transition or the green transition. And do we have the resources that we need? I've heard some numbers where, like, per year, globally, we would need around $50 billion to really achieve SDG 4. But one thing we need to keep in mind is that when we run the numbers, at the end of the day, domestic financing is the largest proportion of resources that come into education. It's not aid. It's really what's being invested at country level. Now, reflecting on how we create more fiscal space, it's something that's very important for countries to really look into, to see where can we leverage more resources within, how are we prioritizing education and other social sectors. So this reflection needs to happen at country level, because at the end of the day, domestic financing remain the largest proportion of education financing. And of course, at GPE, we are promoting innovative financing, where we try to bring different types of partners, different types of resources, different types of expertise. We support that, but at the same time, a greater focus on domestic financing and trying to create that fiscal space to really find the resources necessary to achieve education goals, or it's the most important thing to focus on.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who submitted questions. I know there's a few we haven't made it to. We've taken note of those. And if we have time at the Q&A session at the end, we'll come back around to those. But for now, I'll turn it back over to Rasha so we can get on to our other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Evans and Allison, for the wonderful responding to questions, and the presentation managed to create a lot of interest for our participants, and definitely we might have more time to respond to more questions at the end. Now we would move on. I mean, we would take the flight from Washington, D.C., where Evans is, to Bangladesh, and go to Aknashka and listen more about the EdTech scalability in the context of Bangladesh. Please, Aknashka, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Rasha, and thank you, Evans, for a really great presentation and setting the context and a very nice overview. So I'll be tackling the issue of EdTech in Bangladesh, and we can move on to the next slide. Yes, so we're asking a number of research questions, and I want to frame this study a little bit. This study was conducted in very close collaboration with the government of Bangladesh, specifically their agency to innovate, which has a very strong push to bring digitization to all sectors across Bangladesh. Within that, of course, education is also one of the sectors that they seek to digitize. The study also comes from a framing of some research we had done prior to this, and I'm just going to link that paper here in the chat. So we have taken a systems approach to trying to analyze this, because it's a very complex problem. And I think, Evans, you mentioned it's complicated, and I want to take that one step forward and say it is very complex. There are a lot of interacting factors within any kind of a system, particularly if you are as ambitious as trying to take something like technology to scale across all schools and all students within a country. There are a lot of interacting factors. There's lots of variability in how these factors interact. For example, just the simple case of giving technology and how it's utilized varies based on socioeconomic status, based on gender. Girls use technology differently from boys in different contexts. And maths gives different kinds of results compared to language learning. So there's a lot of variation even within a very simple provision of a device and a specific learning system which is provided digitally. So keeping all of these in mind and the complexities that this problem poses, we have taken a systems approach to try and understand what's going on in the context of Bangladesh and how technology can be optimally scaled up. So some of the research questions that we set out to address in this study was, one is, what is the structure of the EdTech system within Bangladesh? And I use the word system very carefully compared to sector, because we're not only looking at the high level sectoral aspect, but going all the way from the child to the last stakeholder within the government ministry. And so what are the various elements and stakeholders, and how do they interact within this network? What are the influence points, levers for change, and what are the perceived barriers to innovation in the scaling up of EdTech? So this is sort of the framing of this study. And the next slide, please. I am going to give you the findings up front and then structure the rest of this presentation based on these findings. Firstly, we see that the Bangladesh EdTech system consists of a closely connected set of stakeholders. The second thing is, which is not very surprising, is that the government is the most influential stakeholder in the Bangladesh EdTech context. And the third is that we need better sectoral coordination and decentralization to support the EdTech ecosystem within Bangladesh. So the next slide is the first piece. The next, please. In terms of methodology, as I mentioned, we use a systems approach, and this included two parts of the study. One was a global self-reported survey from EdTech innovators. The condition being that the EdTech innovations had to be implemented within Bangladesh for at least a year, would have to have a minimum of 1,000 beneficiaries, but they could have developed this anywhere. So you could have developed an innovation in the US, but it was being implemented in Bangladesh. That would be considered as part of the study. And we had 53 innovators responding to a very large questionnaire, one part of which was asking the question of who are the various actors that they interact with within the system and to what degree do they interact. And then we also had a lot of in-depth group discussions as well as interviews with a number of very high-level stakeholders, and also across the entire system, all the way from parents, teachers, and to ministry level stakeholders as well. And we used this data in a combination of both the qualitative as well as the survey data to do a social network analysis and trying to understand the system, and then that is supported by all of the qualitative information as well. We had, in terms of the stakeholder interviews, there were 46 interviews with 84 stakeholders, and I point this out specifically because with some of the high-level ministerial stakeholders, there would be multiple people present within the same room, and only 25% of them were women. So, sorry, 25% were women. So, the next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, that this is a very well-connected network of stakeholders. How we arrived at this is all of the interview transcripts were coded for stakeholder type, and wherever you had two stakeholders appearing within a coded segments together, they were marked as co-occurred, and that was then used to plot the co-occurrence of stakeholders, which then gave us this network. So this network is fairly tightly connected. If you see in the table, you see the graph density of 0.4, which is about average, and then the average path length is 1.7, which means to get from one stakeholder to another stakeholder, most stakeholders will have to go via 1.7. So you're more or less connected to any other stakeholder almost with only less than one person in the middle, or one kind of stakeholder in the middle. So it's a fairly tightly connected set of stakeholders. And if you see some of the larger nodes here, so the big ones are obviously national NGOs, development partners, the government, and then tech entrepreneurs. Now, please keep in mind, this graph is going to be a little bit different from what I will present a few slides down. This is simply plotting their interactions within this network and not the type of interaction, so that we've analyzed separately as well. So in this case, this clearly looks at these are the major players within the EdTech system. The child or the student is actually a very, very small stakeholder within this system in terms of their influence. We also find this is color coded in 3, so that basically these are the 3 sort of modules. If we go to the next slide, you can see that these 3 color groups form roughly 3 types of stakeholders that are more close with each other compared to other groups. So it's not a very distinct separation, but it's a very broad sort of separation in terms of public sector stakeholders working together, community-based ones working together, and private ones working together, but they all, of course, interact within this network as well. We also find that if you just go back for a second, and I'll come back to the slide, that there are some lines here which are denser in their connections compared to others. And if you go to the next slide, you see some of the most connected stakeholders. So connections across stakeholders, not surprisingly, are between the development partners and government agency, students and teachers, ministries and teachers, and government and NGOs. So sorry about this. So the network is laid out in not a very surprising manner. But you also see one of the critical stakeholders, which is the EdTech entrepreneurs themselves, the people who are making the technology, are connected the closest with students and not necessarily very well connected or deeply connected or strongly connected with other stakeholders. So that's the first sort of finding, is that government is a very strong stakeholder within this whole network. If you go to the next slide, and this is what this section is going to show. So the next one, please. The government has strong influence, and the innovators or the edtech producers have pretty low influence. So while edtech producers or edtech entrepreneurs are very well connected within the system, they don't have much influence. And how we plotted this was basically trying to find interaction types across various stakeholders. So finding X influences Y and marking all of those interactions. And within that kind of a directed graph, we find that government ministries are invariably influencing most other stakeholders. They are themselves also getting influenced to a certain degree, but to a very small degree from other stakeholders. Whereas tech entrepreneurs are mostly receiving influence from all kinds of stakeholders. So they're largely very constrained and more or less kind of being told what to do within this context and very little freedom. So there are some of the qualitative quotations over here. For example, entrepreneurs say that, we have offered all of my content even for free, but it is an effort. Apologies for a second, please. Hi. So even if they're willing to provide all of their content for free, they're not really able to see the take up for this kind of content. Or, for example, everything has to be decided from the top. The local education administration doesn't even take any decision very clearly. So something like multimedia projectors are not working, it has to be approved centrally. So there's a lot of centralization of what is going on. And then the last thing is in terms of the regulatory environment. So the edtech entrepreneurs are saying that the legislation needs to change. One of the other things that's happening, which is not necessarily a regulatory or a legal requirement or something that can be changed legally, is a general perception that because technology is geared towards education, it needs to be provided for free. There are fundamental costs, and Evans, you talked about the cost effectiveness. So there is quite a significant cost for even those providers who are managing to provide this for free. And that somehow needs to be covered, and it cannot be a good which is either subsidized entirely, because then that decreases the incentives for innovators to innovate. So the next slide. And also, just to make this point of entrepreneurs being connected, this is the data that is coming from the entrepreneurs interviews, which is showing that they're very much connected to almost all stakeholders, with the maximum connectivity between students, parents, and teachers. So these are the stakeholders which are the most closely connected to the end user, and therefore their insights and their voice really needs to be heard. The next slide, please. The last point I wanted to make, which emerged through the analysis of all of the interviews and transcripts, was that better sectoral coordination or coherence and a large degree of decentralization is required to support the system. So the next, please. This is just a set of quotations which are trying to outline what I have just said, which is if one is in terms of coherence and understanding. So EdTech is understood very differently across different stakeholders. For example, one of the entrepreneurs says that if you have online connectivity and you're making content, it is e-learning. But the purpose of e-learning is not properly realized, and there is a huge gap in how people understand that. Or in some cases, they say that if someone is making a PowerPoint and presenting that, that is EdTech. So overall, sectorally, there needs to be a more coherent understanding of what EdTech is. for there to be a very kind of directed push towards scaling it up. So in spite of the fact that there is political will, there is significant room for things to change. The other is this centralization idea, which is some of them say that at the secretary level, for example, they will suddenly change after 1 or 2 years. So it takes a lot of effort for them to constantly be building relationships. And I think for a lot of the listeners to this webinar today, this might be a problem which is very resonant as well. It's true for many, many contexts. There's also teachers who think very differently about edtech. They're very clear in stating that there's no replacement for in-person teaching, and I think this came up in the previous presentation questions as well. So overall, there needs to be a significant amount of sectoral coordination. And the last point, the next slide, please, is one of the things that is very visible by its absence is edtech incubators. So the overall environment does not really support innovation as such. And therefore, the last point here, which is the innovation ecosystem density needs to be increased. There are some frameworks which talk about how having a lot of innovators in one location, Silicon Valley being an example, tends to produce products which are very viable, quickly tested, and therefore can scale up whatever is working best. So this is basically the last summary slide saying that we need better regulatory environments which are easier on the entrepreneurs, better decentralization so things can be taken up easily, a common understanding of edtech across stakeholders, and more innovation ecosystem support. And the last slide, I would just like to thank our team and partners. So A2I was great working with them for over 1.5 years on a very regular basis, which is a government agency in Bangladesh. We also have 100 who undertook the global survey for us, as well as my co-researchers, Arnaldo Pellini and Namrita Sharma. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pavna, for the wonderful presentation and the data and the illustrations. It's really very comprehensive, and we've been receiving questions in the chat. We would proceed now to the presentation from Egypt, and then we would answer the questions after the 3 presentations altogether. Thank you very much, and we're very grateful that you've joined with having the cough. But thank you very much. That's a very high level of dedication, and we really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And now we would take the flight from Bangladesh to Egypt, and we would have now Professor Al-Nagar, who would give the presentation about the strengthening the capacity of Egyptian teachers. And that we've been receiving questions about teachers because the capacities of teachers is really very critical for the success of the education technology and innovation into the classroom. Dr. El-Nagar, the floor is yours. You have 15 minutes, please.
Okay, I'll try to stick to the time. Hello, good afternoon. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to present my ideas about the strengthening the capacity of Egyptian teachers to use technology for innovations in the classroom and the role of using technology for teachers. Please, next slide. So, preparing teachers to employ education technology in the classroom is a combination between Ministry of Education and Ministry of Higher Education. They are responsible for preparing teachers in pre-service or in service capacity strengthened for K-12. Please, next slide. Okay. Let's explore some statistics about the teachers in Egypt from the statistics of 2023 and 2024. Number of teachers in Egypt is about 1,055,000. They are divided in 3 types: general education, technical education, and other education. The most number of teachers are concentrated in general education because the number of schools, number of students are concentrated on this stage. In general education, is about 800,000 teachers. They are working in general education. In technical education, there are about 118,000 teachers, and in other education, 132 teachers. Next slide, please. The teachers in Egypt distributed in many educational stages: preschool stage, primary stage, and preparatory and secondary stage. The most number of teachers are concentrated on primary stage because the primary stages consist of 6 years. Preschool stage 2 years, preparatory 3 years, secondary stage 3 years, but in primary stage it is 6 years. So the number of teachers in preschools about 63,000 teachers. Number of primary stage teachers is about 469,000 teachers. Preparatory stage 265,000 teachers, and in the secondary stage teachers there are about 121,000 teachers. The educational, how to prepare Egyptian teachers. Ministry of Education require applicants for teaching position to hold educational qualifications. Educational qualifications, it consists of two main parts: necessary pedagogical knowledge and the technological skills that you have to acquire, to practice, to teach, to teach students in any level. So universities collaborated with Ministry of Education. They offered a diploma in education, and no one can teach students even he gets a diploma of education or get a degree in education. So diploma of education is a mandatory as a prerequisite for practicing the teaching profession. In 21st century skills, technological proficiency is essential skills for educators to meet the demands for modern education. How to use technology, how to employ technology, how to use technology, not only the number of technologies the teacher know, but also how to employ technology in the right situation. So it equipped with the ability to integrate digital tool into the classroom, fostering interactive and engaging learning environments. So training programs and diplomas in education focus on utilizing educational platforms, creating digital content, managing virtual classroom, using advanced tools like interactive boards and e-assessment systems. So, while educational policies and curricula emphasize the need of integrating technology skills, using technology in education, but there are many challenges remains the teacher's proficiency in these skills. The use of digital tools, such as educational application and online platform, it's improve learning experience for teacher and students. How to employ this technology, how to use AI and digital technology, how to enable teacher to take a decision to use technology, to employ technology in the classroom. What is the suitable technology for the students in the educational situation? So the employing, the employing of technology is to enhance teaching performance and improving the quality of education. Ministry of Education constructed a technology development centers. It's about 250 centers all over the Egypt country. The Egyptian Ministry of Education play a vital role to modernizing and enhancing educational process, to integrate technology into learning by constructing technology development centers. This center, working the centers, many experts in the field of education, in the field of technology, subject matter experts. They are responsible for many responsibilities, such as developing technological infrastructure, training teacher and educational staff, creating and enhancing digital content, managing educational online platform, supporting electronic exams, providing technical support, and last, monitoring and evaluating performance for teachers and the students and how they employ technology. What are the benefits of using technology, of employing technology in the classroom? There are many educational platforms in Egypt. Ministry of Education rise to several official channels and educational platforms to support learning process and provide diverse educational resources for students and teachers. Let's explore some of these platforms. EKB, Egyptian Knowledge Bank, is one of the largest digital library offering a variety of educational resources from many international databases and libraries. It is for free for any teachers, for any students. E-learning platform. It provides access to educational materials, textbooks, exams, and examples for exams for all students grades level. Zakir digital learning platform. It offers interactive educational content, including lessons, quizzes, and so on. Live streaming platform. It enables direct interaction between teacher and students through scheduled live sessions and virtual classrooms. حصص مصر platform. It provides explanation for curriculum, reviews, and interactive exams with innovative teaching methods. مدرستنا educational channel is the broadcast lessons on TV and YouTube, targeting students in primary and preparatory stages. Edmodo and Microsoft Teams platform. It facilitates communication between teachers and students and enhancing virtual learning environment, enabling real-time communication and assignment management and collaborative projects. What are the technologies used in the classroom in Egypt? The real technologies used in our environments. Interactive smart boards, it's used for students from KG to secondary stage. Tablets and laptops for students. And we have a huge program executed for secondary stage students to use tablets for learning and for exams. Learning management system. Ministry of Education have a fantastic learning environments. Students can explore the content anywhere, anytime, and learn from these materials at his own pace. Digital platform like Egyptian Knowledge Bank, we have said about the EKB before. We talked about this before. E-assessment systems. Platform for Ministry of Education offer e-assessment quizzes, assessments, exams, trial exams for all education stages. Online streaming platform. Ministry of Education offers a streaming platform synchronously and asynchronously. synchronously by virtual classroom and asynchronously by videos offered and upload. You can download the videos from this platform. We will talk about the challenges of employing education technology in the classroom. There are many challenges in education in Egyptian community, like a weak technological infrastructure in some schools, the lack of training and professional development, financial constraints, resistance to change, culture and social changes, technical and operational issues, time constraints, and teacher experience level of using technology. The role of Egyptian universities to prepare teachers in education technology. Universities in Egypt, especially faculty of education, offered a specialized program to prepare teachers in the field of education technology and field of education. These programs include Diploma of Education, General Diploma of Education. This is for non-education graduates, professional diploma, special diploma, master, and doctoral degree in education technology. Next slide, please. Let's explore these diplomas. General Diploma in Education is for university graduates except education. Its duration 1 year for 2 semesters. Example for this diploma, what is offered by Supreme Council of Universities. It offers many educational subjects, courses, except 2 courses, Education Technology 1 and 2. It concentrates on psychology, foundation of education, many skills to help teachers to shift his career to be a teacher. So the main concentration in this diploma is for educational courses. Professional Diploma in Education Technology is for educational studies graduates. For example, Egyptian e-learning university, as an example for offering professional diploma in education technology, its duration 1 year for 2 semesters. Some of courses that offered in this diploma: information education technology, e-learning technologies, management of e-learning systems, e-courses development, and graduation projects. Special Diploma in Education Technology is for general diploma or professional diploma graduates, offered by ELU as an example. The program duration is 1 year for 2 semesters. It offers some courses like Advanced Information and Education Technology, Programming Techniques, Information Ethics, Introduction to Web Technology, E-Learning Fundamentals and Principles, Multimedia and Virtual Reality. Masters in Education Technology is for special diploma graduates, special diploma in education graduates. ALU, as an example, that offer this program, its duration 2 years, 1 year for courses, 2 semesters for courses, and 1 year at least for the thesis. Some of courses as in education technology as a quality assurance and accreditation of e-learning systems, research methodology in education, advanced studies in e-learning, e-learning technologies, and research seminar in e-learning.
Dr. Nagar, can I ask you to wrap up because of the time, please?
Okay, the last one. Last slide. Alexandria University, it's offer PhD in education technology, and it have many courses in the field of education technology. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nagar, for the very thorough presentation. And there are many interesting questions in the chat asking about studies and things like that. We would come to this later. And we would proceed now to the west of and north of Africa to Tunisia. And we would have Mr. Adel Ghalloul to tell us more about the integration of technology and the digital transformation efforts that has been taking place into the country of Tunisia. So, Mr. Adel, the floor is yours. And please keep asking your questions into the chat, and then after this presentation, we would have the Q&A session for that.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Tasha. But I'm really pleased to be a participant in this webinar. This really interesting webinar talking about development of EdTech in the region. Let me please stop the video because I don't have. Sometimes I don't have a very today and yesterday. These days are very rainy in Tunisia, so there is sometimes some small problems with my connectivity. So just let me stop the video, please, for a moment. Thank you. Okay. So my presentation is, as the other presentation, we'll talk about digital transformation of education in Tunisia, but I will more focus on public policies and especially on a problem. The main problem we will discuss during my presentation will be how to deliver the digital education solution and services, and what is the governance model to try to improve the quality of these services and to have a real feedback of the citizens and a real engagement of the service providers. Next step. I will begin with the introduction of the strategy, how the strategy was made in Tunisia, how the strategy was built, and the importance of the concept of building the strategy and the alignment of the strategy with education strategy, but also with digital transformation as a world government strategy. Second, I will focus on the challenges in delivering digital services in education. I will introduce GovTech which is a program financed by the World Bank and is focusing on digital transformation for user-centric public services in education and social protection. And we see education not only in the area of learning, but in the area also of, let's say, of social or human resources services. And there is some problems that needs to have all this ministry working on the same problem, the problem of the citizen, especially when we deal with problems in education. And then we can also present some, let's say, good practices or some main achievements, some success, and maybe also some unsuccessful things. Next, please. Okay, there is a strategy, a dedicated strategy for digital transformation in education, well made, and what is called PDTE. The strategy was aligned also with the education strategy, but the second thing is that there is also, as in other countries, a national digital strategy. What is good in this, what is best practice in this, that both strategies are well aligned. Well aligned to have the ministry in charge of ICT, of digital and telecommunication, really involved in education problems and working together to enable the development of services in education. This is a crucial point, because the education ministry is not really capable of solving all this infrastructure communication, which is more national problem, and which is macroeconomic and sectorial problem of in communication. Next, please. The strategic problem is let's say for education transformation. One, learning digital technology as a curricula, integrating it in the curricula, but also using, as said in the previous presentation, as a tool, or let's say more than a tool, enabler to better learning quality. So in Tunisia, what we can say, what are the achievements? The Ministry of Education introduced a curriculum of digital in all levels of the secondary school, middle school and secondary school, from key 6 to key 12. So every year, this curriculum was updated. In 22, I think 21, 22, and now we have in Tunisia, let's say, a modern curriculum in ICT, in digital, covering all students. It's a compulsory course. This is important because we consider that ICT is not only a tool, but it's a subject also. So every student needs to have these skills. But now, how we teach this curriculum? It's not based on content; it's based on skills. So we developed a curriculum with let's say a mix of digital skills and life skills. So it's not based on content; it's more based on activities to develop life skills. The second point I will focus, or the second objective is the problem of, let's say, inequity. We experienced the problem during the COVID-19. COVID-19, Tunisia, it was very difficult to have, let's say, to ensure there is a lot of platforms like what it was presented by our colleague from Egypt, a lot of platforms, virtual library, EduNet, platform to support in exams, etc., etc. But the delivery of such services are difficult because there is no real equity and equal opportunities to all students. Next, please. So this is the problem, the challenge that we worked on. So how we do that? First of all, we define what what are the services. We focus on let's say on 3 services. The first services is enrollment in school, enrollment in primary education, in secondary education, middle school, and secondary schools. Enrollment says that every student and every parent have an ID, have a unique ID, digital ID, and and the parent have this ID and this password and to access the platforms to make enrollment, registration to the schools totally digital. So now we can build on that. So this is the first service. Today, 99% of students from public school and private school are in the system. So this is new because 2 years ago, we didn't have students from private sector. And now we know if these child are now in the education system, private and public, or are on dropouts. So this information now, and they are also working on having all the results in the same database. So we can really build policies, education policies, on the whole population of education. So the challenges with the delivery of the services. So there is unequal access, particularly for vulnerable groups, because there is weak quality of broadband connectivity. There is also low quality of services. Data center is not well dimensioned. There is also sometimes disintegration. There is no integration between all the systems. There is also lack of a lot of public and private sector capacity to be more responsive to problems, and there is poor accountability for that, and no mechanism to support this accountability and the feedback of users. So we focus. Next, please. I have 10 minutes. Next, please. Next, please. This is very.
2 minutes remaining. 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay. Next, please. Next. Oh, okay. So GovTech. This is digital. This is 3 components: simplifying and digitizing administrative process. Administrative process, let's say it's a processes in general. Building public and private capacity and improving access to and connectivity. Next, please. Okay. The approach is based on live events. Live events is an approach which is centered on citizen. So we have 2 live events. One, my child is enrolled in primary or secondary schools to continue his or her education and improve his or her learning. And the second event, my child drops out of school. So the approach takes 4 months or 5 months to have an as-is analysis centered on the journey of the citizen. When we say citizen, it's a parent and student, and also teacher and the director of schools. To be solution, we identified the area of improvement to be solution and new digitized use journey. And then this is very important, an action plan of reform. And this action plan had accompanied all the solution and is validated at the ministerial level. It is validated in the cabinet of the presidency of government, and the action plan is followed by the Director General of prospective and reform in education in government. And this structure work closely with the ministry to follow up on the action plan. And we also implemented and deployed a monitoring tool, which is based on a barometer, which is made every year, but also focus groups. And we had reports these reports are presented are followed to the ministry level, and then we update the action plan. This is maybe sometimes difficult to do, maybe sometimes long to do, because we need to have this okay from the ministers, but we can make real reforms and we can have real achievement. Next, please. Okay, the work was done in 3 levels. So one level is connectivity. More than 2,100 schools are now connected on optical fibers. This is very important. It covered more than 75% in fiber optics. The others are connected, but in small schools connected in 3G, 4G. Also implementing LAN in more than 2,200. This is Project EduNet 10. The second level is to be sure that we have for all the sector a student ID which is aligned with the national unique ID. We strengthen also the exchange services in the national platform interoperability. For example, today sector like social sector or transport sector don't need paper from document from students or from parents to have, for example, allocation to poor people or maybe transport tariff, special tariff for transport for children or something like that. So we also help in data platform and also reinforce the data center to be integrated to the cloud, government cloud. Next, please. Okay. Maybe 1 minute. What we can say about that? The action plan of live events. I'm enrolling my child at school. What we have, what are the achievements? Digital enrollment extended to all people in public and private sector. This is very important. So we have, let's say, a student register today. All parents have access to digital platform, but only 20% use it. But this is a problem. This is still a problem. But they have ID to access, but they use it only for enrollment. Improved e-learning platforms. Action plan dropping out of school. Digital tool in EMIS for identifying pupils with learning difficulty or dropout risk has been set up. So we know, but the problem we have is the introduction of appropriate mechanism for remediation. And this is not an education problem. This is an education, social, and health problem. So we built it. So it's not easy. Now we have 30 schools having such mechanism. But Tunisia, we have, let's say, 1,000 schools at the level of middle school where dropout is very important. Interoperability and infra, unique identifier for all pupils, data exchanges, high availability education data center, connectivity, I said that, and also accountability mechanism. This is very important. Today we had 2 waves of parameters for citizen feedback, and there is follow-up and improvement of action plan. And let's say today, the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Social Protection, and Presidency of Government have the mindset of accountability and try to improve. It's not easy, but try to improve the services. And there is good, let's say, good improvements, about 15%, but in some services, there is not enough improvement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adel, for a very rich presentation. I mean, you have only 10 slides, but they are full of information and full of data and wonderful national initiatives. And now we would like to invite all speakers to respond to questions. And I would give the floor, Alison, please, if there are like any question for the floor.
Yeah, we could start, I guess, with a question for all speakers from Viola Cuesa. Sorry again for the names. They've heard from a number of education experts say that EdTech is not for developing countries due to poor internet connectivity and limited access to computers. What would you recommend as low-cost EdTech approaches that can be adapted by developing countries?
Could I answer, please? Okay. And developing countries, we are suffering from the huge number of students in the classroom. So we have to face this problem by using technology. Using technology, it depends on the infrastructure of the schools of the countries. So I can use a high quality of technology, high technology. It require a maximum specs for computers for devices, but also we can use a low quality technology like a web browser and websites, static and dynamic websites, without using high technologies that require high capacity for technology for using in the classroom. So it help us in Egypt using the platform for Egyptian Ministry of Education. It help us in our classroom to deal with the huge number and working according to the infrastructure of the learners, infrastructure of the students, not for the Ministry of Education only or for school only.
Can I respond as well? So that's a really good question, and I have 2 things to say. One is we have actually tested in Kenya an application called Opia, and I'll just pop the link in here shortly, which was developed by some Google people, and it is available offline on Android phones, which are 7, 8, 9 years old as well. So you can just download the app when you have internet connection, and then it can be used at any time. Having said that, it is not low tech at all because it is a personalized learning platform. It gives feedback on an individual basis. There is a voiceover on it. So if you're not able to read very well, you can actually listen to the lessons and respond as well. It's currently for mathematics, but they're expanding it to other languages and subjects as well. So there are creative things available. On top of that, we actually did an evaluation to test the learning on this application, and we found that we can actually get quite creative with technology. In this particular case, we could actually reduce the tech requirement by half by getting children to sit together. So we find that peer learning actually has a very strong impact on learning, and it actually overtakes the reduction in the amount of technology. So even if you give two children devices individually and they're sitting by themselves and learning, it is less effective than two children
Fully.
sitting together and learning on a device or sharing a device. So there can be creative workarounds to both the cost of technology as well as the kind of technology that can be available.
Excuse me, would either of the other speakers like to contribute some thoughts? Okay, if not, we can go for another question. Thank you to you both. We will start combining some questions, so I might not be attributing names directly to these at this point. But one question we are seeing is asking how can educational technology be designed and implemented to effectively address the diverse needs of students with disabilities in South Asia, the Middle East, and North Africa, ensuring inclusivity and equal access to learning opportunities. And kind of related to that, another participant was wondering, in regions where limited internet connectivity poses a significant challenge to providing access to quality digital education resources in the classroom, what do you think of incorporating offline learning resources to try and bridge this gap to improve that inclusive and equal access? For whoever wants it.
Okay, I can talk on this topic. I think using technology, it used for all learners. We are using adaptive learning for the individual differences between students in countries and educational levels and learning style. And using artificial intelligence and high technology, it can be used to help the students to get the right path for learning.
Anyone else want to chime in on that one? I know our other two speakers have their cameras off, but you can also message in the chat if you'd like us to unmute you and give you the chance to respond. Dr. Bapna, anything you'd like to add to that? No?
No, I think I concur, and also I just gave an example of the OP application, which can be used offline as well. I think I just want to add maybe slightly tangentially to this in terms of personalization. So while we were beginning to research into the personalization of technology for this project in Kenya with OPIA, we went through this whole phase of defining what it means. And there are some frameworks available, but it could mean anything from opening a textbook to a page that the child is actually learning on, to have very high-end adaptive learning and AI-driven systems as well. All of that is personalized. I think as long as the technology is catered to meet the needs of the learner and not force-fitted for the context or for the learning, it should help.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. We have another question in the chat then from Sajid Ali, who asks, the rising involvement of tech companies has a tendency to work for profits and not for ensuring kids and teachers' welfare. How can we move in a socially conscious way? What should educators do?
I do have something to say on this actually. In fact, this Bangladesh project was slightly driven from the perspective of the public-private partnership. I think it is quite essential, like in the development sector, particularly in education, we feel like we're doing great service by teaching children. It shouldn't be the case. I think if a product is good enough, it should sell itself. And we find very often there are certain products which governments have created, which are not even being taken up by learners for free. And this is not to do with school education, but in higher education, especially, you find a lot of MOOCs, the massive open online courses that have been created. And I know an example of the government of India, where there was these huge investments made in MOOCs, but there's only about a 3 to 5% completion rate of these online courses, and they're all available for free. So the quality is being compromised in the process. And I do think there needs to be a good balance between the private sector developing technology, which is high quality, not as charity, but then also being compensated for what they're making. And that's where governments can play a role in subsidizing it. But they're creating a product for profit only increase. And I'm not like, advocating complete free markets here, but there needs to be the right balance of the freedom to innovate and get rewards for the innovation, and also being compensated for that in a sector which requires this to happen. So it's not an easy problem to solve, but there needs to be this, like, innovation also has to be the heart of this.
I can also maybe add some comment on that. My idea is it's not a matter of good tools. The problem is not to have perfect tools, perfect digital tools. Even though these tools are wonderful, are based on AI, etc., etc. Which is important is to have in mind that education today is more about skills, how to develop life skills using this technology. Sometimes very, very, let's say, very poor technologies would help more child in acquiring these skills. So educators should work on network-based, on collaboration, because today teachers are more oriented on contents, on tools, on less than in pedagogy and in methodology. So we need to enable this change in education. We need to have them discussing with them to create the community. The community is sometimes a community in the school, but not only in the school. Today we have the opportunity to have motivated community all around the world. And in Tunisia, we have a good experience with that. We develop a lot of network in every subject, in primary, in maths, in science, etc. And we have this network working with challenges, with prices, and also working in international area with other countries, and this is supported by organizations like French organization UNICEF, World Bank, etc. Thank you.
Can I come in, Alison, on this question? So, and I agree with Dr. Bapna. It's a two-way conversation, and yeah, we cannot really say there is a free market. But what I think that we can do as educators, we finding this where we can find these mutual benefits for governments and those private actors. The other aspect is how we present education. And when we say it's an investment, sometimes we are not convinced, and education is a real investment in different ways. Even for those private actors, I think, where do they recruit? Where do they find expertise to really build those tools? And for them to invest in education and making sure that this expertise exists, it's also a mutual benefit. And also, I really think that by doing this, having this conversation and say, okay, we are in this together, and we are really building a tool that's really put forward value for money. Basically, are the children learning with this tool? And also, it is an opportunity for you to provide the right skills that you will need in the future if you have a long-term view for your company, if you have a long-term view on growth. I think it's a conversation. It's taking time because it's a matter of changing culture. And it's also a matter of how we also build on that culture of innovation. And I guess this conversation has to happen on a daily basis, having a platforms for governments to interact with private partners. And also sometimes we ignore the local ecosystem where there is a lot of there are a lot of resources, there's a lot of expertise. Really build on those local ecosystems before we go outside is also a great investment for governments. I have the case not necessarily in MENA or South Asia where the education management information system in Rwanda, for example, it was developed by a national Rwandan who was a student at the time, and then it has become a major tool that they are using to analyze data. So I think that's something that really governments can do even more, and giving that opportunity for young people, for young new startups, local organizations to grow and solve solutions in education. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for contributing. We will pivot to one more question before wrapping things up. Excuse me. So amidst all of this, people are wondering in the chat, what kind of support is needed to be provided to teachers in order to support them in incorporating ed tech into their teaching? Kind of what content is available for teachers to access? Do you offer or recommend training or education to the relevant staff? Do you recruit staff for this? How do you approach supporting your teachers in this process?
I suppose I could go. I think the first sort of caveat to this whole thing is teachers are already fairly overburdened with a lot of things and duties which go well beyond the classroom as well. Particularly in the current global context, there's a lot of socio-emotional learning that needs to happen, and teachers also need to take care of that aspect of learning for students. So they're going above and beyond. Having said that, there's been a lot of studies showing different kinds of motivation levels for teachers in different public schools, private schools. As it feels a little bit like a leaky cauldron, like you plug something here is leaking. So there's a lot of complexity to how teachers come into the picture. They're definitely very central. But I think if I had to say one thing in this case, it would be creating technology which supports teachers, and it's not an add-on on top, like not technology for the sake of it, but something that teachers feel is making their lives easier is going to have uptake. Whether it is a classroom management system, whether it is utilizing videos, but it's not it is intuitive to a degree, but we also find in a lot of our research that digital training is required to use technology appropriately, and we never factor in that time, and therefore the budgets around the policy for training on the technology itself. Even if it is 1 or 2 days worth of time, at a national scale, it can cost a lot. So I think if technology is being kind of introduced, it needs to factor in that training time. Of course, and I think this has been discussed before, is in terms of it not threatening teachers, in terms of replacing them. But I think, yeah, so again, I think my underlying statement would be that if it is something which genuinely teachers feel is going to support their work and decrease their workload, there will be take up happening around that. I have had some experience working with state governments in trying to introduce new teaching learning methods as well. And self-driven or teacher motivation is considered through a lot of factors. One of them, something simple and complicated, as where teachers are placed. So their selection of cities or villages, wherever they want to be placed, can be a huge motivational factor in actually their functioning within schools as well. Yeah.
I mean, I can quickly come in to add to the point you just made, and especially on the issue, on the question around teacher autonomy and how technology should be seamlessly integrated into the process. It's not something that they are carrying on their back, because I've seen classrooms where they bring the technology and the teachers, they forget about the students because they have this tablet in hand and they are staring at the tablet the whole time. They forget that there are students around them. And for me, the most important thing is the seamless integration of technology within the teaching process has to be very clear and well understood by teachers. But also, I feel that, like, when you're a teacher, I mean, I was a teacher, and when I was part of an idea, or my colleague as a teacher was part of bringing in the idea, it's easier for me to accept and adopt this if I know it can bring results. So basically, we have different entry points to involve teachers, whether it's through their initial training, or their pre-service training, or their in-service trainings, but also the community of practices that sometimes we have in other countries, and or having the mentors that can help. I think we should definitely leverage all those entry points and making sure that technology is really seamlessly integrated, but without removing the autonomy of teachers. And also the other aspect is that they don't have to use technology for everything, because they are teachers and they know what they know what they are doing. I mean, some of them, or like depending on the level of qualifications in the country, but teachers, they really know their students. So basically, I think we really need to really, it's not that this technology can work for everything and then you go in a classroom, you give it, but the teacher will tell you, okay, this is where I need more help. I need to reduce my workload in this area. Or maybe it's about grading papers, for example. If you can do that, you do it based on the context, but not saying this technology will work everywhere, every time for every teacher. I don't think this is the way to go. Thanks.
Thank you both. Would either of our other speakers like to add on to that? All right. If not, that's totally okay. We will then wrap up. I will hand the floor back over to Rasha to kind of give some concluding remarks, and thank you all for such great responses to the questions.
Thank you very much to our wonderful speakers and to you, Alison, for moderating that such an important topic that is spotted as a top thematic priority area into our BizLine study. And I'm very happy that this level of interest is among the participants. And this would encourage me to invite you to write a blog post on the topic where people can respond to the blog post and keep the communication ongoing about the topic. That would be really wonderful contribution. And now I would hand over to Marina for the closing remark by KIX EMAP. Marina, please.
Thank you very much, Rasha. Let me start by thanking everyone that stayed with us a little bit longer to continue this important discussion today. So as Rasha was saying, this is a very important topic for the region. We're already seeing EdTech as a reality across several countries in the SAMENA sub-region. And it's so important that we pause and reflect together on what has been learned so far and what other efforts are needed in this area. And I think one key message is that EdTech is not an end in itself, but important to approach it as one tool to improve teaching and learning across contexts and ensuring it's always contributing to equity in the classroom as well. So let me close this webinar by thanking our wonderful speakers today. It was fantastic to learn about the expertise and approach followed by GPE at the regional level, but also to learn about the rich experiences that exist in Bangladesh, Egypt, and Tunisia. And for sure, this conversation, this exchange on the top of EdTech in the SAMENA countries does not stop here. We will continue, as Rasha said, bringing this in the form of blog posts, but also seeking other opportunities to continue exchanging on this important topic. And for that, I invite you all to fill out our post-activity survey, in which you also be able to tell us not only about your experience in this webinar, but also what other formats you would like to use for continuing this discussion with us. Without further ado, thanks everyone for the great comments and questions in the chats and for our wonderful speakers today.